Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox. I'm the Compliance Evangelist, and I'd like to welcome you to this special 5-part podcast series sponsored by Affiliated Monitors, which celebrates Affiliated Monitors' 15 years in business as the first entity specializing in independent integrity monitoring. Founded in 2004, Affiliated Monitors provides independent integrity monitoring and ethics and compliance assessments nationally and internationally and across almost all industries. With its knowledge of effective ethics and compliance programs and cultures, Affiliated Monitors is respected for its work as the corporate monitor on matters ranging from multinational corporations to small and mid-sized companies and even individuals. Having served in nearly 750 monitorships, no one has more experience as an independent monitor than the team at Affiliated Monitors. For more information on how an independent monitor can help improve your company's ethics and compliance programs, visit this podcast series sponsor, Affiliated Monitors, at www.affiliatedmonitors.com. Over this 5-part podcast series, I visit with Vin DiCiani, the president, founder, and CEO of Affiliated Monitors, and we talk about and celebrate the history of Affiliated Monitors. In our first podcast, we look at the idea which DiCiani formed, which led to the founding of Affiliated Monitors. In episode 2, we discuss the early days of Affiliated Monitors. In episode 3, we talk about the expanded use of independent monitoring. In episode 4, we consider the marriage of independent monitoring and ethics and compliance programs. And we wrap up with episode 5 about Affiliated Monitors' growth. It's a fascinating exploration that I know you will enjoy if you want to learn about the history of not simply monitoring, but the way regulators think about the ethics and compliance programs that we all work on. This is Tom Fox. This special 5-part podcast series on the history of Affiliated Monitors is a special presentation of the Compliance Podcast Network. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, back for another episode in the history of Affiliated Monitors. As always, I'm joined by Vin DiCiani, the president and founder of Affiliated Monitors. Vin, welcome.
Thank you, Tom. Nice to be with you again.
And today I wanted to explore the marriage of independent monitoring and ethics and compliance programs. It seems to me that when independent monitoring was created, the focus was on practices, accounting, legal, regulatory compliance. But at some point, that really changed to more robust legal compliance. I was wondering if you could detail for us how and when you saw that change.
Sort of an interesting evolution, if you will. When we started Affiliated, our first cases were in healthcare. And we worked with practitioners. I can remember we did a number of practitioners, chiropractors, MDs, and the first monitoring that we did really focused on, for the chiropractors, it was billing and coding and overutilization of services. So it was not so much focused on ethics and compliance, but it was focused on, if you will, compliance with regulatory requirements. And in this case, billing standards, started to evolve, believe it or not, with the Massachusetts Chiropractic Board that had a number of cases of young providers who really didn't understand the regulations. And so they started, as part of their sanction, when an individual chiropractor was allowed to stay in practice, as part of the monitorship, the chiropractor had to implement a compliance program, and we were drafting compliance programs. Compliance programs, there were the elements of conflicts of interest and codes of conduct that you would put into that kind of thing. That was sort of the very beginnings of sort of the ethics and compliance elements that we were seeing. Now, this is early on. This is 2004, 5, 6, only in the chiropractic space. If we were monitoring for a medical board or a dental board, it was all of that regulatory compliance. Did you meet the regulatory standards? On the federal side, we started to see this being implemented. And as I told you, we did this AML case, and that was very much on anti-money laundering controls. Some of it had to do with conflicts of interest. Some of it had to do with code of conduct. Again, early beginnings, right, of that kind of thing. Over time, then, it just evolved to be much more of a concentration for government agencies. And so when we started to do some of the suspension and debarment work that we do with the federal government in like 2010, 11, 12 timeframe, they very much were focused on sort of ethical considerations. A lot of the work that we did early on for the Air Force suspension and debarment official and the Navy suspension and debarment official involved, there was wrongdoing, on a corporate level, but it didn't, sort of reach that threshold of bringing a criminal case. So administratively, they would use the suspension and debarment rules to have companies demonstrate, which is the requirement under the FAR, that they were presently responsible contractors. And so present responsibility in the eyes of the suspension and debarment officials included ethical considerations. So did you have a code of ethics? Did you have a compliance and ethics program that had training, that had a disciplinary process, that had investigative tools, that perhaps had a reporting hotline? And then, what was the ethical culture like? So as we're doing all of this work, and I'm calling it a marriage, we're starting to see lots of different agencies picking up on the elements of what the suspension and debarment officials are doing and federal and other regulators are doing. And it sort of became the norm, right? And so a lot of monitoring that we do now is not just focused on legal compliance or, regulatory compliance, but now has all of these elements of ethics and codes of ethics and compliance requirements. I mean, it's sort of an interesting evolution, and I know you've seen it as well, right?
Let me turn the focus a little bit. We saw a series of memos come out literally almost over 10 years, I would say, and some spoke directly to monitorship, some tangentially. But I wanted to ask you about those because these are always a topic of conversation amongst the compliance professional and the compliance profession. So we started off with the Monford memo, then we had the Yates memo, and this year, in 2018, we had the Binkowski memo. And I wanted to ask you what has been the impact on affiliated monitors of these three memos?
So the Morford memo, when it came out, obviously had a lot of commentary on it, right? Because it was the first time that the notion of monitoring was in any way sort of spelled out, right? And we know that the Morford memo was really giving direction to DOJ attorneys on the selection of monitors and sort of what the monitor is supposed to do and reporting requirements and all of those kinds of things. I have to tell you, when we created Affiliated in 2004, we were built on the Morford principles. So like 4 years before, we already were doing those things, right? In terms of how monitors got selected and how we, found our subject matter experts and the type of sort of standards that we held ourselves to, independent, professional, those kinds of things. So the Morford memo, in a lot of ways, was a great, I want to say, sort of a push for Affiliated. It allowed us to point to a particular document out of DOJ that were sort of guidance for the selection of monitors, and that's who we were. The other thing about the Morford memo is when it came out, I wrote an article. It got published, I think, by the Healthcare Compliance Association or the American Health Lawyers Association on how the principles of the Morford memo could be applicable way outside of just DOJ criminal corporate matters, and how the principles could be applied in any situation where a monitor could be used. And so I think the Morford memo was actually a great benefit for Affiliated. I think it expanded the appreciation of monitorships and gave other agencies the idea of for using monitors. The Yates memo didn't impact us all that much because we're still monitoring corporate and individuals. So that one didn't affect us so much. It wasn't so focused on monitoring, as the Morford memo was. But the Benkowski memo, as we did in the previous talked about in a previous podcast, did have an impact and does have an impact on us. And we think, again, in a good way, right? So the Benkowski memo talks about sort of limiting the use of monitors to only certain situations when it's warranted. But it does give companies sort of the incentive to go out and evaluate their own ethics and compliance programs. And it does compel them to strengthen those programs so that if they are ever confronted with an investigation or some kind of disclosure that brings them to DOJ, they can demonstrate that they have strong programs and, perhaps get special consideration. That is really a good part of our work today. We've talked about the fact that Affiliated does a lot of work on the monitoring side of the fence, but we also do a lot of work on the proactive side. So helping companies, evaluate their programs to see where they're strong, to see if they have certain weaknesses. So the Benkowski memo, I think, again, is another impetus for us to get out there and let people know and let companies know that you don't have to do it on your own, that there are entities out there that can help them, strengthen their programs. So I think each memo in its own way has had some impact on us.
Well, Ben, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time, but I've been visiting with Ben DiCiani, the founder and president of Affiliated Monitors. Today, we looked at the marriage of independent monitoring and ethics and compliance programs. I hope you will join us for our final episode tomorrow, where we sort of wrap things up and look at some of the key themes that started Affiliated Monitors and have grown with Affiliated Monitors over its 15-year history. Ben, I frankly can't wait to hear your thoughts tomorrow. So thank you, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thanks, Tom.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox. If you'd like more information on Affiliated Monitors, check out their website, www.affiliatedmonitors.com. I hope you will join me again tomorrow for our next episode in this fascinating and celebratory 5-part podcast series on the 15 years of Affiliated Monitors, which details the history of not only independent monitoring, but ethics and compliance programs. This is Tom Fox. I'm the Compliance Evangelist. This podcast series is a special presentation of the Compliance Podcast Network.